Bruchim Aboyim. Welcome everyone. About to begin Be'ezus Hashem, another class in Basic Judaism, as we analyze and critique Rabbi Donan's book To Be a Jew. I'm here in snowy Richmond, Virginia. We're covered with about probably at least 5 inches of snow outside, and we are just trying to find where's our chat room here.
I told you you were too close.
I think we have the chat room here. Okay. So we're starting on the bottom of page 19 in the book To Be a Jew. We're talking about the God of Judaism. So he says like this. We just talked about how our suffering and our salvation from suffering throughout the generations can be brought as a proof of God's existence. This is very famous that Emperor Franz Ferdinand of the Habsburg Empire of Austria-Hungary was the one who was assassinated. His assassination brought about the beginning of the First World War. And he asked, years before that, he asked his advisors, "Can you give me a proof that God exists?" And they said, "The Jews, Your Majesty." We see, if we look at the history of the Jewish people, it points to God's existence. And both in the fact that we've been suffering for so long, and in the fact that we've survived through the suffering, meaning that it's a greater miracle because we've suffered, that somehow we've survived as a people, as a faith, as a community. And that has justified our faith in God. Rabbi Donan says, of course, one cannot offer scientific proof that God exists, or that it was through His will that the world was created, or that He's concerned with the perfection of that which He created. But neither can it be proven that He does not exist. He's talking on the scientific front. The thing is that there are other ways of knowing other than through science. So I don't see what the purpose of this statement is if talking from modern day science. In modern day science is not the be all and end all, and science knows that, because it has to be that way, because science throughout history has been proven wrong. So any real scientist is just waiting to be proven wrong. And it's only the arrogant scientist who makes the assertion that he is absolutely right. Now maybe it's in finer details as we go through history, as we gain more knowledge and we retain more knowledge, as opposed to in various societies throughout history where knowledge was scarce, and so we lost that. Whereas here in today we have a great deal of knowledge that science has that's been built up, but still it's not perfect, and I would say, although I'm sure plenty of people disagree with me, that from my understanding of science and so forth, that the issue is not with God, but the issue is with science. The science is not. I know a lot of people will think that I sound very ignorant making this statement, but I still will stand by it because I believe this very much, and it makes sense in a scientific way as well. Is that science is of course not perfect. They admit that they're not perfect, and something so great as the existence of God that we know from other sources to be true, history, and there are certainly times in history where the existence of God was a scientific fact. The most important to us would be the revelation at Mount Sinai. Another one, though, would also be in the times of the temple, perhaps to a lesser extent. But it's essentially the purpose of the Holy Temple was to preserve the Sinai event and carry it around with us. That's why we had the Ten Commandments in the Ark of the Covenant. Not only to remind us of what happened at Mount Sinai, but to actually keep it alive. And so the power of prophecy came through the Ark of the Covenant. And great miracles happened in the temple. All throughout the history of the temple. Even in the second temple, where there were less miracles, still there were the 10 miracles mentioned in Pirkei Avos that happened always in the temple. So certainly there were times in history when the manna fell and so forth, and for sure at the revelation of Mount Sinai, above any other time in history, that's the pinnacle time in history where God's existence was for sure proven without a shadow of a doubt. No one who was there could deny what happened. And that historical event carries over to us today and brings with it the revelation of everything that we have that we know from beforehand. Because we wouldn't know about those other times in history with such clarity if it were not revealed the times before then, when it was also clear of God's existence. For example, right after the flood, you had only a few people left, and they all knew God existed. And in the times of Adam, the thing is, there were only a few people around then. So we wouldn't know if those stories were made up, except for the fact that they were revealed by God at Mount Sinai, which was such a tremendous event. So anyway, we today with our science and so forth, we could not prove God's existence or disprove it. For sure, never disprove it. Not only because I believe in God as I'm saying this. I'm saying this because there's no way to disprove God's existence. Obviously, it's very difficult to disprove any existence. People want to say this doesn't exist, that doesn't exist. You can only prove something does exist. You can't prove something doesn't exist. But the issue is not with God, but with the science that we have today. And as science advances, we'll come to a time eventually when they will be able to recognize God. But I believe that this will come in a miraculous way and not in a natural way, because God set up the world as He revealed to us in a way that we have challenges and that we should maintain our free will. So it couldn't be like that. Okay. So he said in the medieval times, in the various religions, by Jews and by Muslims and by Christians as well, but mostly by Jews and Muslims, there was the philosophy was going out to prove or disprove God's existence. That was the medieval way. And that may appeal to some people. And later in history, you had also, Christian scholars the same thing. Pascal was very famous. Didn't really prove or disprove, but he made his wager, saying, "Well, it's definitely better to believe God exists." Is what Pascal suggested, meaning that if He exists and we believe in Him, of course that's right. And if He doesn't exist, and we believe in Him, we didn't lose anything. But if we don't believe in God and He does exist, then we lose a lot. Meaning, we only lose by not believing. We never lose by believing. That was Pascal's teaching. The question is, though, who to believe in. Of course, do we believe how he believed? No, we don't. Just because, meaning you can make that statement about any belief, but you have to figure out which belief is theologically sound. But today, modern philosophers, they question the proofs and disproofs that the medieval philosophers used. And they have contemporary arguments, but also they're empty. Rabbi Donin said that's why the acceptance of God's existence is a matter of faith, emunah. I would have to disagree with him here, and he will address this later. But the faith, he's going to talk about Abraham's faith in God and so forth. The faith Abraham had in God was not belief in God, but rather trust in God. That when it says, and he believed in Hashem, and it was counted him for righteousness, it doesn't mean the fact that he subscribed to a particular article of faith. That's what God attributed as righteousness to him. But rather the faith in how he lives his life, and how he that it's not about proper belief, proper doctrine, but rather the practice that expresses faith not just through religious practices, but through overcoming challenges based on faith. Meaning it's very easy to live according to a religion when it's convenient, and then it's very convenient when it's not convenient to not do so. But when you do so when it's not convenient, that's what Abraham's faith was really, that the Bible was talking about. Because Abraham, at a certain point in his life, it was no longer a question to him whether God existed. When God started talking to him, he didn't question God's existence. He didn't have a crisis of faith in the sense of, does God exist? But he did have Christ, although at certain points, our sages say, and the text say that God cast thrust that upon him this, like where it says V'yar Zamakum Merachok, he saw the place far away, and our sages call God Hamakum, the place. That was for our sake that happened. We can get it. It's a little bit of a thing that we don't have time for right now. But I think it's a religious weakness that Rabbi Donin is trying to ascribe to faith rather than knowledge, which he's going to talk about later, but still, he's arguing essentially with the Rambam. The Rambam tells us, Maimonides tells us, we are obligated to know that God exists. Not to believe that God exists, but to know that God exists. And as Moses told the people in Deuteronomy, you were shown to know that the Lord is God, there's no one else. Not you were shown to believe, you were shown to know. So, I think this is coming in the modern Orthodox realm of throwing things on faith rather than on knowledge. In the sense of faith versus knowledge, not in the sense of faith as a value on its own, not as opposed to knowledge. It's a different expression of faith, emunah. But the way that he's talking about emunah is not the way that the Bible speaks about emunah, about faith. It's nice for us to talk about faith in that sense and use the term emunah, but really, it should be really for us almost the same word as knowledge. That it's just only because we use the term emunah, faith, because the world around us uses that word, maybe it's wrong. We should really be talking about knowledge of God, according to Maimonides. And I don't think Rabbi Donin is great as Maimonides, nor as great as Rabbi Victor Miller of blessed memory, who dedicated his life to a knowledgeable faith. And also, it is within the capability of every human being. This is what our Midrash tells us. That Elijah the prophet himself says that it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, a free man, a slave, a Jew or a Gentile, anyone can be worthy to Ruach HaKodesh, to divine inspiration, based on their deeds. It doesn't mean that people always do it when they think that they're getting this type of revelation or inspiration, but everyone has the capability of doing that, and we have to strive for that. But that's a separate issue. We can have the experience of God. It's not something that's out of our hands to experience God's existence. But more than that is that we can, that we have to, know logically that God exists and not, just ascribe it to blind faith. That's something that we find in other religions, because their beliefs are so weak that they need to rely on faith, mysteries of faith, as they would say in certain religions, in order for anyone to believe in it, because it's something that is not logical. Whereas our religion is very logical. Yes, we do go beyond logic in our relationship with God, but in the end, our religion is a logical one. I don't know I haven't seen any chats in the chat room. I see 14 viewers. If someone would say hello or something. Just want to see if there's anything going on here. If I have the right, because I'm using a different window here for these chats. Now, Rabbi Donan is going to argue with everything that I just said here, and I think this will shed light on what I said and what he said, and we'll find a good common ground between the two things. But before I got into his words, I felt we should have a different view first, because that's how in Judaism and logically and everything that you can really understand things in that sense by questioning and bringing different views and so forth. So he said that the God in whom Abraham and all his descendants expressed their faith and saw fit to worship defies proof. This is because he is infinite and man is finite. This is what I just said. I still haven't gotten any chats here, so maybe I'm in the wrong chat room or something. I don't know, I'm not sure. Not only is man finite physically, but his perceptual and intellectual abilities are also finite. So that's just like what I said, is that science has not reached the level of understanding God. Not that the problem is in God, but the problem is with us. And if God were part of the framework of man's 5 physical senses, such a God would have to be something or someone or something more restricted than the omnipotent, the omnipresent spiritual being in whom we express our faith. That there's a particular reason for what he says here. I mean, he's saying that for something, for us to measure, observe, so forth, that cannot be God. The Kabbalists explain the reason for that is because God loved us so much, he wanted to give us free will to make the choice between right and wrong. So if he was so obvious, we'd have no choice. We could only do what's right all the time. I mean, God could do a miracle and give us that perception, but still, it's impossible for any created being to really grasp what God is totally. So, I mean, that comes down to the old question that people ask, could God create a rock? It would be too heavy for him to lift. Now, to talk about in the sense of a rock, a stone, that's silly. But to talk about in the sense, can he grant to his creations a full understanding of who he is? That's a question. Alright, we can live with that question. We don't need to answer it. But when you think about such a question, that's a very major question. Alright, I'm very afraid that I don't have any chats here, so probably won't be able to take any questions at the end. I'm going to write something in the chat room, and we'll see if people see that. I just wrote hi. You'll see that's from me. Okay. Such a God would be reduced to the finite, thus capable of being altered and transformed by man, and even killed and destroyed. Such a God would indeed not be the one universal God at all, yet another of many deities to whom men over the centuries ascribed supernatural powers and to whom they paid allegiance. That is probably a good definition of Christianity, and how it's something that theologically is not sound, this idea of turning God to a man, and that being all of God. Meaning, if God would want to send an angel something to explain to us some greater truth, or the whole process of prophecy and everything, that's something. That's what the Torah is, and so forth. Even greater than that, because the Torah is the will of God, and so it's one with God. It's something very tremendous. But it's just, the idea of Christianity to say that all of God could be in the person of a man. That would be something that would be impossible philosophically, because it would lack the greatness of God within it, within such a man, and so forth. It would not be possible. And so it comes down that someone there is a servant of God, or even could be a challenge from God in the opposite way, as in the case of Jesus, who was a false prophet, who was sent basically to test us, to see, are we going to follow the true word of God, or are we going to be fooled by miracles and so forth. That's not what we believe in. We believe in something much greater. But then we have this question. So the proof of God's existence is beyond our capacity. Why should rational man proclaim such faith with the same fervor and intensity that comes with truly knowing the Lord? Because we do see knowledge being something central to the Jewish approach to belief in God. Like we said, Maimonides said, not that we have to believe in God, but that we have to know God exists. Right in the beginning of his code. And the Bible says in many places, you were shown to know that the Lord is God, there's no one else. You should know the God of your father, and so forth. So in order to answer this, Rabbi Donin very wisely says we have to answer this from the negative. We have to first go, meaning in mathematical terms and in scientific terms, we can know and come to the state where we're almost proving something is real by ruling out its non-existence. And this is a classical philosophical approach that we have, certainly medieval philosophers, both in the Jewish and the Muslim world, and to a lesser extent in the Christian world, that they were not able to define God and who he is, but rather in what he isn't. Even though we of course have explanations of who God is, but to a lesser extent of who he isn't. And I'm sorry if anyone's trying to type in the chat rooms. I'm not getting any chats here. And if anyone would try again to type something, it'll be here. And so this is a classical approach back from medieval times. That we can ascribe existence through God by ruling out his non-existence. And that's a very sound approach, philosophically and logically. And he goes through the classical, we say the blind watchmaker idea, We see a world that's so precise mathematically and so forth. It can't be coincidence. The way life is and everything. That it would take blind faith to ascribe that to mere chance, just as much as it takes more blind faith, everyone says like this, to ascribe that God doesn't exist than to say that God does exist. And I think that's something that is something we could probably all agree to here. Just to call something nature, that's just another form of faith. Still need to answer it. There's still mysteries. He says atheism is also a form of faith. Like all the idolatries people worship. Thing is that our sages said clearly that the atheist is much worse than the idolater. And it's something we have to talk about in that issue. But first, let's see what he said. In our times, atheism seems sophisticated and timely, and so too in ancient times did the worship of Baal. All one can ask himself, especially in view of the amazing scientific knowledge now at their disposal. And so first we have the scientific knowledge. We know so much more about the world that only makes it more mysterious. And begs to say that there must be a creator, and also the history of the Jewish people. And as far as not that only there is a creator, but there's a particular relationship, a covenant that the Jewish people for sure have with something out there, which would seem to be logical to believe that it is what it says it is, as the creator of heaven and earth. It wouldn't negate God's relationship with other people, but it wouldn't prove it either. It's a different issue. But is it more reasonable to say that God exists or that he doesn't exist? Which is more rational? The greatest rationalists among Jewish philosophers had no doubt about the great reasonableness of the basic Jewish principles of faith. Now, I just want to address something that Rabbi Donin says here, that he says that atheism is just another form of idolatry. I think he misses out on just how serious atheism is. And I think that's something also that we have to, in a social sense, just make a social commentary on times we're in. I'll start off with a story that there was they say Baal Shem Tov, he would take wagons. In the old days, it would be different wagon drivers, and generally, if you ever been to Poland or Ukraine, you see more in Poland today, but to a certain extent as well in the Ukraine. You see it in America too, but not quite the same way. But in Poland, Ukraine, you see a lot of crucifixes and so forth, particularly in Poland. Baal Shem Tov lived mostly in Ukraine, but he traveled in Poland as well and other places. And he said that he had a few times he would take a Christian wagon driver, a wagon driven by a Christian wagon driver. So generally, when they would pass by the crucifix, whatever, they would cross themselves as is the Catholic custom. I guess I'm assuming it's the same in the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox Church of Ukraine. And at one time, one of the wagon drivers who he knew he wasn't Jewish, and he wasn't Noahide, he wasn't anything other than a Christian, as he would assume. He did not cross himself when he passed by um, the crucifix. And the Baal Shem Tov said, we cannot trust this person. He's not a religious person. There's something lacking in his character. Now, is that to say that the Baal Shem Tov was supporting idolatry? No, God forbid. But we have to recognize that atheism is worse than idolatry. That is what our sages teach. And so, it's unfortunate that Jewish people, obviously not religious Jewish people, but people of Jewish descent, who identify themselves, unfortunately, as Jewish. And it's a big chil Hashem. If they identify themselves as Jewish, they should probably just give up the whole thing. But, or, again, really come back and do tshuva, ideally. But if they're going to continue on this path and call themselves Jewish, it's a big problem. The Jewish people, to this very day, have been fighting against religious expression that is not our own. And yet, they're not offering anything in return. I could understand if someone was fighting against, expression of religion and offering something new, offering something better, offering something holier. That would be something. But to only try to mitigate and dissolve religious expression, that's frankly not only disgusting, but it's a tremendous chil Hashem. And even though we disagree with the other religions strongly, we cannot be fighting against the not only because it looks bad, but because we're not offering anything in return. Even though it's it's a different it's a different approach, but and so forth. We can't be going on like this and saying, well, no, we've got it. Just don't be anything. That's what it seems like. So many, or just not in the public places and so forth. Obviously, hopefully, most people are not pushing this in the, to remove it from private places. I don't think there's any too much like that. But in the public places, we don't use our taxpayer money, this and that. The thing is that it's a good thing. It's not, unless you're offering something better. So then so then just be quiet. Don't do anything.
I told you
Excuse
were
me.
too close.
So I opened up the other chat room. I want to see if there's anyone here. I'm sorry. And so he belittles it just to say, well, atheism is the same as idolatry today. In a certain sense, it is. Okay, I missed all the chats today, and now I have this thing about poltergeist. So I missed out a lot. If someone wants to copy all the chats and send them to me, because obviously this is on a totally different tangent than what we're discussing. But now I can read the chats. So, and if anyone, alright, So, in a certain sense, yeah, we're right that that we have to identify we have to identify atheism as a religious expression. Yes, that's definitely true. And in that sense, it comes out that atheism is at least equal to any other religious expression. And if we in modern day American society, with freedom of religion and so forth, we have to recognize, though, that atheism is a religious belief, essentially, just like any other religious belief, and it should not have more um, any more rights or anything than any other religious belief. That's one thing. But really, in the Jewish view, um, an atheist is worse than any other religious belief. And I was very shocked when a friend of mine told me, he said, there was someone who became a Noahide, and he asked his rabbi, who can he date? And the rabbi told him he could date other Noahides, and lacking Noahides, he could date a Muslim or an atheist, but not a Christian. Now, I never heard any prohibition, first of all, for a Noahide to marry someone who is an idolater. First of all, that's first of all. So even you're going to follow Maimonides' view that Christianity is idolatry, I don't know why it would be forbidden for a Noahide to marry a Christian. There's no sin in that. But more than that is that but it would be much worse for this Noahide person to marry an atheist than to marry a Christian. I don't understand what this rabbi's view was on this. And if you really want to get into, and he's saying Islam is okay, there are plenty of rabbis who say that Islam is also Avodah Zarah. I bet you didn't know that. But just like you have views that Christianity isn't, it is the same thing about Islam. There are many views that Islam is also Avodah Zarah. Most people think no, it's not, and it's a lack of scholarship. They don't know all the views, and it's also been a bit of propaganda, well-meaning propaganda though. But this to tell someone, that it's okay, that it's better to marry an atheist than to marry a Christian for a Noahide person, I don't understand what this rabbi was thinking. A Jew, of course, can't marry someone from another religion. The marriage only chal, only a marriage from the Torah standpoint between two Jews. That's just the way it is. It's not a marriage in Judaism between a Jew and a non-Jew. It just doesn't work that way. But of course, there's such a thing to convert and so forth. And someone could become Jewish, but it's not a marriage at all in Jewish law. But if someone, I guess, who's practicing as a Noahide, even though we never really had such a movement on such a large scale and so forth, to have this Noahide movement the way that people are trying to do today for whatever reason, and it's questionable, the whole thing. It's it's also well-meaning. The it's still definitely not to marry an atheist. I don't understand where this rabbi came up with this. I don't know who he is. I heard this only a second. I'd rather prefer to not believe that this story was even true. Okay. Rabbi Donin continues now. Jewish scholarship and religious leadership from the very beginning shown sensitivity to the demands of reason. And of course, a Noahide can't marry a Jew without converting, but I would think, if someone's a committed Noahide and they really, they've shown their belief in God and they're going to be, I don't know why there should be problems with the conversion, if they're really serious about it. All right, whatever. Because they're obviously converting out of belief in the Torah and not just for the sake of marriage, without belief. Okay, next. Although still, a Noahide shouldn't be dating Jews. They should be dating other non-Jews, and if they want to be in that pool of dating Jews, they should just try to go and convert. And that's probably, for someone's children and so forth. If someone is a Noahide, it's better probably to become more normative. All right, we're on page 21. You're right. All right. Most rabbis said they're in communities where they're not dealing with non-Jews so much that they don't talk about these things. That's why. But I don't understand this whole idea of the Noahide movement and so forth, unless someone's in a situation where they're just not able to convert or they have no desire to do so, and that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to make it into a movement, and children have to be raised Jewish regardless, I'm not sure what that means. If there is unfortunately intermarriage where the father is Jewish and the mother isn't, and she didn't convert, obviously I said she's not Jewish, she didn't convert, children are not Jewish. We see that in the Bible. This wasn't the first time in history that the Jewish people have been so lost. We see in the Babylonian exile, many Jews did intermarry, and the men who married non-Jewish women, they were told to send away these women and children because they were not their wives and they're not their children according to Jewish law, in the sense that even if they would convert, all right, they could be one family together, but they're really not. If they were born already, they're really not the children of this person. Technically, they could still, if they did convert, come together as a family. But I think Ezra was talking about the cases where they didn't want to convert. Okay, page 21. Now, it says Jewish scholarship and religious leadership always wanted to look at reason, and we always emphasize that Judaism is a religion of reason. And I don't think anyone would argue with that. Not even the biggest mystic, quote unquote, would argue with that. Just opposite. When you get to people who speak English, who know about mystical things, they hold on. Hello? Hi, I'm giving a class now. Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? Okay. Okay. So we do have miracles in Judaism. We don't say that they're against reason, but they're above reason. In many cases, miracles are within reason. But we don't have theology that's clearly against reason. We believe God exists. He created the world by His will. He revealed His will at Mount Sinai and other moments in history. The revelation at Sinai, though, is something that lends us to the other things and makes them even more logical and so forth. He said they cannot be categories against reason, but they're things that are very reasonable The only reason to be a Noahide is a step to Ger Tzedek. There are other reasons to be a Noahide, but I'm talking about, as an individual and depending on his situation, but to make whole societies Noahide, when Mashiach comes, that's how it's going to be. The people don't want to convert. It's going to be all Noahide society, but today in this world, it's a very strange type of situation. To make I don't, but to be a Noahide is a step to Ger Tzedek. That's a different thing. Okay. So you can't be categories against reason. Reason and faith in the Judaic framework are not antagonists but complement one another. One fills in the limitations of the other. Even in the subject of miracles, which abound in the religious sources, it is important to remember that the teachings of Judaism are not based on them. This is something very important. Miracles were vehicles in which achieving certain historical ends, and even sometimes to inspire faith, but the truth or the validity of the faith does not hinge on them. Had none of them occurred, I'd say with the exception of the revelation at Mount Sinai, the basic truths taught by Judaism will not be compromised. Even without the revelation at Sinai, the truths of Judaism would still be there. I mean, they were there before the event at Sinai. But the covenantal relationship of Judaism, as we have it today, hinges on Mount Sinai. But anyway, the views of Judaism are valid religious views, which in fact maintain that even God works as miracles and wonders only through there are valid religious views, he says. He's making a statement that it's kosher to believe that God only makes miracles through nature. It's hard to say only, alright, maybe yes, maybe no, which he himself sent to motion. While certain events may be highly unusual, even awesome, incredible, genuine wonders in which a divine role cannot be doubted, they are not supernatural in the sense they're not contra nature. I mean, for sure, if we look at, the biblical narrative of the 10 plagues, all of these things could be understood in a natural way. And the reason for that is so we can maintain free will. But the awesome thing is that they all happened at the same time. But when we get into the Midrashim, the question is, are these Midrashim to be taken literally or so forth? That's a question. But the Midrashim get into things which tend to be less natural. But even those things that seem a little bit outlandish still have some natural explanation and so forth. And that's in order that we can maintain free will. The concept of God, which the Jewish people stubbornly clung, said this long before, he wrote this in 1972, so it's long before, Mr. Obama talking about stubbornly clinging to religion and guns and so forth. So it's one that admits no compromise with the universality of God, with the spirituality of God, with the unity of God. I disagree with him when he talks about the spirituality of God. That's something that's a Christian idea, that God is spiritual. We say that God transcends not only physical but the spiritual. Spirituality is also only creation of God. Obviously, he's not physical, but he's not spiritual either. I think it's a lack of understanding what spirituality means. Both things are creations of God. And, of course, in a sense, you could say, in a certain sense, spirituality is quote-unquote closer to God in a certain way because it's not hidden behind the challenges of physicality. But still, to define God as spiritual, I would disagree with that and rather see spirituality as the path to God, that the physical can get to God through the spiritual, but still not that to define God as spiritual is definitely wrong. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. That's how the Torah begins. He's the God of the universe. And the Ten Commandments start with, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. That means that God reveals himself through history to the Jewish people. The universal God is the same God who brought freedom to Israel and to whom Israel declared its allegiance. It's the same God who's the God of the whole universe. That is also our God, particularly. And it's in a way, I always say that's why, since in Judaism we view, you read the Siddaros, that the generations are going down through history and so forth, that why do we refer to God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob? The reason is because these ancestors of ours, these great teachers of ours, these ancestors of ours, physically and spiritually, understood God in a way better than we understand. And so we're addressing God, the same God that Abraham addressed. He didn't understand perfectly God, because God is beyond understanding, but he understood much better than us. And so that's why we would say a statement like the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, or in other cases we said like the God of Rabbi Meir, Balanes, and so forth, the God of Rabbi Meir, so forth, things like this. And really could say about any tzaddik, it's all really the same God, of course, but it's reminding us that we don't understand, but there were others who understood better, and we're addressing God in that same way. That it shouldn't be that confusion. Okay, but the big point is, why the Ten Commandments start with, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt? Why doesn't it say, I am the Lord your God who created heaven and earth? Well, the thing is, we weren't there when God created heaven and earth, so we can't relate to that. God has to tell us about the creation after he identifies himself as the same one who took us out of Egypt. Even though taking out of Egypt, it was a local thing. It was to these people here, this nation, this community. But it's greater that because it's right in our face. We know about it. Okay. Any questions? We'll give a few seconds next for questions on this subject. Questions on any subject. I will give it till my clock here says 11:15, and I'm sure we're in the middle of that. I'll give it till it says 11:17, and then we can we'll pack it up for today. We are his physical manifestation. I don't like that term, to say that we are his physical manifestation, except for the virtue of the fact that it was revealed to us in the Zohar like that. But even physical, it's probably wrong to understand us as a physical manifestation, but rather as something that we exist as his proof, as that we overcoming these challenges, and we prove him. And also, but there's the spiritual aspect of God, but still there's no manifestation, there's no way to really to manifest God. There's no manifestation of God in any sense, but in the what we would call the Or Ein Sof, the ultimate existence of God in his eternal and limitless qualities. But we are his representatives. I think that's the best way we could put it. But I would say it's probably best not to read the Zohar. The Zohar is something that is very dangerous for a person to read without proper guidance, because first of all, the translations, we don't have any good translations in English. If you know Hebrew and you don't know Aramaic, I would say to study the Zohar with the teachings of Rabbi Frisch, which is the commentary Masak Midvash. I knew Rabbi Frisch. I used to eat in his house. A blessed memory, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, and his commentary on the Zohar. That's something that could be studied. But to open up a Cincino Zohar or Berg Zohar, something that's not good. However, a good thing to do as far as studying of the Zohar is not to study it, but just to read the words in the original Aramaic text. If you're able to read Hebrew letters, reading, not just scanning it, but actually moving your lips, reading the words, that is something that purifies the soul. It's a very good spiritual practice. But to try to study too in depth and try to understand things, if you have certain parts of the Zohar, like the parts that are brought in the Chok Yisrael, or the parts that Rabbi Frisch brings in his book Niglos Zohar, those are just like any other midrash, and they're very inspirational, very beautiful, and that's fine to learn. But to try to develop a theology of the Zohar on your own without someone teaching it to you is very dangerous. And that's really the same thing with any Torah thing. I mean, we see other religions that grew out of the Torah. It's not that there's something wrong with the Torah, and there's not something, God forbid, wrong with the Zohar. The problem's with us. Is people, they'll open up the Bible and they'll make up all kinds of silly things based on what it says in our Holy Bible, and they'll mistranslate it and misinterpret it and so forth, and make a whole nother religion. And that's the problem with the Zohar is not with the Zohar. The problem's with our understanding the Zohar. Okay, another question was, were Noahide laws abolished as the Talmud mentions in Bava Kama? The answer is that what it means that the Noahide laws were abolished is that since most of the world doesn't know about it, God is going to be merciful on people and not judge them in a stricter sense based on the Noahide laws if they just don't know about it. But still, it is the system that's best that a non-Jew is obligated to follow for sure if he knows about it. But if he doesn't know about it, God is not necessarily going to be so strict about it. But the only thing I could say about it is, we have the Talmud, and the Talmud, the way we follow it is what was codified in the codes of Jewish law. Now, the only code of Jewish law that talks really in a code way as far as how to live, and not in the sense of theory in other commentaries, is Maimonides, the Rambam. And so since Maimonides recognizes that the 7 laws of Noah still apply, I would say that is the halacha that we follow, is that we don't follow that view that they were abolished, but we can take that view as being valuable in the sense that God will be merciful to good people who might not follow all the details perfectly. Okay, so what's the question? You have a question about the state of Israel? What's the question? Because give a few more seconds to see the question, and I might answer it, I might not, but we'll see what the question is. I'll give another. Okay. Give another few seconds for the question for user 75899. Still waiting. If any other questions, feel free to ask. All right. People who left Israel in the last 62 years ago never come back. Do they have rights in there? that is a political question, not a religious one. And so, as a rabbi, I don't have answers to political questions. I would assume that this person asking about the Palestinian right of return, and I can't have an answer for that because it's really none of my business. Since the state of Israel is uh, is a is a rebellion against Judaism, and it's not has nothing to do with the Jewish religion. Um, there's nothing I can say about it because the whole institution of the state of Israel is wrong, and therefore I have no answer for that. I really have no answer. There's nothing, you know. You know the you know, if anything, you know, the only thing I could maybe address is this state of Israel is not Jewish. I mean, the people there, they're Jewish people there, but and and they do have a chief rabbinate, but it's not. Um, it's basically a puppet rabbinate of the of the of the state. Um, this is a minority opinion. I think he's saying minority opinion about the Noahide laws, or the minority opinion about the state of Israel. The minority opinion. All right, this is something important here. Putting aside the issue about the about the Palestinian right of return, I have no comment on it. And the only comment I can give, just to know about it, is I don't think most Palestinians really are interested in going back to their old homes, whatever. Maybe getting there, maybe being paid for their homes or something. That's something else. But I don't know if they want to necessarily go back to where they came from. The connection. But as far as the majority of Jewish people, religious Jews, when we talk about majority, the majority is not based on what lay people say, or even people like me with the name rabbi in front of them say. The question of majority and minority in Jewish law is based on what the Gedolim say. And there's a very small minority of great rabbis. Many people will even question if they're great rabbis at all. I'm not going to go that far. I will admit that the great rabbis that are the Zionist rabbis are great rabbis. But all of those people you mentioned, Belz, Klosenberg, Chabad, Amun Yisrael, maybe Boston, still in different yeshivish, they're not anti-Israel, but they're not pro-Israel either. They're not Zionists. They're not, and the thing is really, really, when it comes down to it, the Satmar, they're really not anti-Israel in the sense that the extremists, Torah Karta, shouldn't even call themselves in Torah Karta. They're not the real Torah Karta. They're not like the great Rabban Blau and these people, the people today. But the thing is that the not against the status quo, but the ideology of the Haredi world is that, meaning if the Haredi parties that exist in the Knesset, if they would somehow have control, they would not make a Jewish state. And so they are living there pragmatically. They are living there as citizens of a state. The ideology of the Gedolim that these people claim to follow, most of them are not the and the thing is saying who's a Gadol, this and that. Also, it's a different thing, but it's if they would, over the years they're having more children, and the Agudist people would take over, and they would follow their Rabbanim, and not just follow the lay people. That's a different issue with Aguda, is that it's in many ways it's not run by the Gedolim that they follow, but it's run by the lay people. And when they have a question, they go to the Gedolim. But the Gedolim are not the ones who are really leading, as much as they want to claim that they're leading the Aguda movement. It's not really totally so. Even though among those Gedolim, you're right, there are some this and that, and within all these groups there are different views, and I'm not capitalizing, lowering the views. Now the thing is that I would say, so then it's the question: is the Jews being victimized and hated for the actions of the Zionists? So that's the question. Is that the reason? And I don't know the answer if that's the only reason. Meaning the question is, do the Arabs, the Palestinians, and so forth, do they hate listen about the Satmar view. The only difference between Satmar and Aguda is saying that make the Satmar view as mainstream and untrue. Agreed. The majority is not Satmar, but the only difference between Satmar and Aguda is, do we work from the inside or the outside? Do we vote or we don't vote? Do we have people in the Knesset or not? But the goal of Satmar and Aguda initially and ideally is really the same. It's only the approach that's different as far as the way the Gedolim approach it. But the lay people, a lot of them have been misled. Even if they have long payas and strimals and everything, it's not the question is about the Gedolim. Now, but then the other question is, and it's not so clear, even from the Satmar view, is the question is, do the Arabs hate the Jews because of Zionism, or do they hate us just they're using Zionism as an excuse? And I don't have the answer for that. And the answer for that is that there's no such thing as the Arabs, just like there's no such thing as the Jews. There are individual people who are Arab who just hate Jews irrationally, and the question is that the majority of the minority, I have no idea. And there are individual Arabs who are upset at the Jews because of Zionism, and the question is the majority of the minority, I have no idea. There are definitely many who use it as an excuse. I'm not denying that there's certainly anti-Semitism in the Arab world, and that, but the Arabs only hate Jews because Zionism is an Torah Carta revisionist history. Again, I agree that in the Torah Carta they take it too far to say that that's the only reason, but the thing is that much more important. Forget about Satmar and Torah Carta, Aguda, Mizrahi, this and that. The issue is that individuals are individuals, and it's not that all the Arab people are one thing. Yes, there are pogroms in Arab lands as well, but the thing was that there were much fewer pogroms in Arab lands than in Christian lands. The same thing. All the Christians were not anti-Semites in the medieval times, not every Christian was an anti-Semite. But no, the Arabs hated Jews. Again, you can't make the statement Arabs. You can't make the statement Christians. It's individual. Yes, individual Arabs hated Jews. Individual Christians hated Jews. And individual Arabs loved Jews, and individual Christians loved Jews. It's not. You can never make a blanket statement about a whole group. It's just impossible. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the what what's more simple than that is that people are individuals. Individuals can belong to groups, but not everyone of a particular race, for sure not of a particular race, and even not everyone of a particular religion, especially when you have big religions that have so many different groups, can be identified one way or the other. And even within the groups that might have officially a particular ideology, the people within those groups, they're all different. Every human being is different. So to make this general statement, why do the Arabs hate the Jews, is not a question at all, because the Arabs don't hate the Jews. Individual Arabs may hate Jewish people, individual Jews. Individual Arabs may hate the whole Jewish people. Individual Arabs may just be upset at the Jews because of the Israel, and individual Arabs might have no problem with Jews. And it's not the anti-Semitism is a message from God, not due to the action of the Jewish people. Anyone else, that is why in Torah Karta border on courses. In Torah Karta, there are different issues in Torah Karta that I can't address here. But the thing is that it's something else. But what you just said, you just contradicted itself. Because what's the purpose? Why is God giving us a message? Because He wants us to do something. He has a reason for what He wants. So everyone agrees on that. Every religious Jew. So the Zionists will say that the message from God is that we have to go back to Israel, and the Torah Karta and the Satmar will say that the message from God is that we shouldn't have a state of Israel, and meaning. But the thing is that it's not that both the religious Zionists and the religious anti-Zionists both view it as a religious thing. So it's not. And other people say anti-Semitism is because we're talking in shul, and other people say it's because of this, and other people say it's because of that, and other people say, well, it just doesn't have anything to do with anything. But I don't see why their belief, just because it's a belief you disagree with, as far as that they're both wrong to attribute anti-Semitism in politics. Okay, that's only if you separate the political from the religious. So I mean, just the question is, what sin are we supposed to repent for? So, yes, to attach it to politics is something else, but some people say that the religion, that the state of Israel, that it's a sin, this and that. Using for political purpose is a problem. I mean, it goes so wrong. The question is, there should not be a state of Israel from a religious view. There are different religious views within Orthodox Judaism, and I mean, it's everything, sins, all the different sins. There are basically three camps of the religious view about the state of Israel. The one that has the most lay people, and even people who are rabbis in the sense they're clergy, but not rabbinical authorities. The fewest rabbinical authorities is the religious Zionist view. The religious Zionist view is that that there should be only one view, God is one. That is not a Jewish idea. The Jewish idea is very clearly um, uh, Elu ve'elu different l'kim chayim, that there are many views and all of them are kosher. That's the Jewish view, is that there's more than one view, and that God is so great that there, or just like we have, different opinions and all different things in Jewish law. And it's wrong to say that there's only one view, because it's losing out on the greatness of God. But just, we can have unity even in being different. We can have different approaches. Just like it's we can we had 12 tribes, and they had different customs and different things, and it's fine. It's not we don't all have to be the same. We don't all have to believe the same. There's just certain core things that we have to ascribe to, but we can have different things. But as far as the question of the state of Israel, so again, there are three basic views, and within those three, there are many details and so forth. And really, they're all kosher. I'm not going to say that the religious Zionist view is not kosher just because I follow rabbis who disagree with it. Now, those rabbis who disagree will say it's not kosher, but it's very hard for me as a very small town rabbi who's not anything great to say that these other people are wrong. If they're great rabbis who know what they're talking about. The thing is, I personally follow this one, but I cannot say that the ones who have a different view are wrong. But just basically, very quickly, there are three views about Zionism, State of Israel. One is that, and like I said, the religious Zionist view, which is the I would say the majority of lay people, but the minority and regular small clergy, but the minority of the great authorities. It's religious Zionist view that basically it's a good thing that we have a Jewish state, but the problem with it is still, even the religious Zionists will say that the problem is it's not religious, and it should become a religious state. And then you have the majority of the great rabbis are saying that we should first of all, it was not a good thing to have had the state of Israel. It was a wrong thing, and then the question is, what do we do with it now that it exists? And the majority of the great rabbis have no interest in making Israel a religious state. They want the people to be religious, but not through the power of government, but rather through grassroots. I would say the difference between the religious Zionists and the Haredi world is the religious Zionists, because the Zionist movement is a socialist movement, and they have socialized religion. They have the Rabbanut that's paid for by the government, and that's how the religion works. And that really turns off most of the secular Israelis to religion, not the Haredim, but because the Haredim have no interest in forcing people to become religious, as opposed to the Rabbanut that does have that interest through the government. The Haredi world is more grassroots, more, I would say, capitalist religion. But the thing is that we believe that Mashiach has to come before there can be a proper state of Israel. The only problem is now the secular people made a state, and there's a lot of Jews there. And what's the best way to protect the Jewish people who are there from wars and terrorism and so forth? And the question is it by being strong and standing up for ourselves, or is it by making peace and trying to make concessions? Is it something totally different, or is it just trying to just totally find the root of the problems and so forth? There are all different views about it, and I would say all of them are kosher. There's not one is more kosher, one is less kosher, and a great rabbis could agree and make that statement. One is more kosher, one is less kosher. But someone like me, I'm just a little kid. I don't have that. I'm not that great that I can make that statement, which is more kosher, which is less kosher. But to me, it makes sense more the view that you know, we should not have it. It doesn't matter what my view is, but it makes sense to me the Satmar view, which is very different from the Torah Karta view. It's not really the Satmar view really doesn't have that many answers. If you want to ask my personal opinion, it doesn't really matter much what my personal opinion is. Nobody asking me, but my view is, until Mashiach comes, it would be best just to have what they call in the one-state solution, because there are very serious problems, not with the Palestinian people, but with the Palestinian leadership, and and to give the Palestinians their own state would be next to Israel, in my view, would be very dangerous, because the Palestinian view is that there should not be a state of Israel at all, and so anyone who believes that they're really going to be a two-state solution that's really going to work, I think they're fooling themselves. And it's going to be a very dangerous thing for Jews and for everybody. It's just going to make a war. It's going to be very dangerous, and it's going to cause a lot of bloodshed. And this two-state solution is a very stupid solution, and it's not very well thought out. The better solution is, I mean, why do they talk about this? Politics is not, but this, in my opinion, and who am I? I'm nobody. But my opinion is like this, and other people have said like this. Now then, that's the bigger question. The regimes around them, are they going to be happy with this? And it's the question also: are the Palestinians so much the puppets of the regimes around them? I don't know, but the main thing is that really, ultimately, the issue is not Judaism as a religion. I don't think anyone will argue that. Even even I mean, anyone who would call as horrible and evil and crazy as Ahmadinejad is, anyone to call him Hitler is really not understanding who Hitler was and so forth. And because the thing is that in Iran the Jews have their religion, so forth, and they're allowed to practice it. All right, so it's not like the way it was in Nazi Germany. Sure not. Now maybe could it become that way in the future? It's possible. The question is how to stop it from becoming like that. But right now, it's not like that. Sure not. Now the question is about, the answer I think is one-state solution. Why do they call it disputed territories? Because Israel never annexed the land that they won in 1967. If they would annex that land and make it part of the state of Israel, why wouldn't they do that? Because then it would be around 50-50 Arab and Jew. and they would lose the Jewish majority. And so they're artificially trying to maintain a Jewish majority in this political region, for that sake, just for political reasons, because they want it to be quote unquote a Jewish state by virtue of having a Jewish majority, a Jewish democratic state by basically excluding everyone else, from becoming the majority. And that's one of the things that they don't want for whatever reason, for a myriad of reasons. So this was the answer, even though he's a really crazy person, but it was a good point that he made, and it was in the New York Times. It was Muammar Gaddafi from Libya said they should make Israelstein, just one state, and where Israelis and Palestinians living together in one political state is still going to maintain their religious and cultural ways. It's just not going to be a quote unquote Jewish state, but rather a religious, not a state where religion. If it would take the American approach, like we of just having freedom of religion, the people are still going to have. I think it's much worse if they have two states, because the Palestinians are just going to keep going and attacking, and it's going to be suicide. But if they have one state with freedom of religion and a democratic state like the United States, I think it could work. Now the question is, the children have been bred to hate the Jew. So that's the problem. Is that the question is it really everybody? Meaning, yes, there's certainly a movement to try to push the children of the Palestinians to hate Jews. How effective has it been? I don't know. We have to understand is that one terrorist can do a lot of damage. It doesn't mean that everybody is like that. It doesn't mean everyone supports what they do. And so the question is, could it be, if there was one shared state? This is not a religious view, this is just a political view. But if there was just one state, and they're sharing together, but they're saying that the people who are terrorists, the people who are criminals, they are criminals, they're outlawed. People who are murderers are outlawed. But the people who just want to live together in peace and share one place, that's a thing. Gullible children taught hatred in school and never outgrow it. Question is, first of all the schools teaching it? I don't know. Are all the children buying it? I don't know. Children are not as stupid as people think, and they're not as gullible as people think. And the thing is, children outgrow silly beliefs. If the statement you said is true, then every adult Christian walking around today would believe in Santa Claus. So it's not true. People do grow out of things, and it is possible and to have to change and so forth. And the question is also, all right, I don't know, for sure there are these type of people who are making these horrible things, and that has to be dealt with. Again, this is just my political view. I'm not a politician, and I'm not even so much of a rabbi. But I would think, it says someone's saying many Palestinians are quietly hoping for peace with the Jews. That's the thing. When the Palestinian tries to do something for peace. It's alright. I'm gonna have to go. Again, you can't make generalizations. Alright, we'll see you later. Hello? Not really, no. No, alright, I'll finish the class now then. Okay, love you. Alright, alright, we'll see you Wednesday for the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch class.